Okay, so we're in the middle of a discussion, okay, as to whether forgetting something that is under your care is considered to be negligence or not. Rav Sharaga is giving us proof after proof. We've been looking at some of the proofs. Some of them seem to be convincing, others not so much. So he brought us something from the Gemara that if a that on one hand you could say that it's considered to be an onus in certain situations, and therefore you shouldn't be responsible. He brings a story from the Gemara in Bava Kama that if a person had a rock that in his Evan Munachat Becheko, the guy's carrying a rock, a big stone, and he forgets about it for a second. I don't know how damages because that it's considered an onus. V'chein ratza ledaktek b'shar Ephraim b'shutav sheshachach limkor es hachametz v'chametz nesar b'hana. Okay, so this is what we left off with yesterday. Two partners in a business that deals with chametz. Okay, and one partner said, "I'll take care of selling the chametz. Don't worry," and he forgets to take care of it. And so the other partner says, now all of our chametz is asur bahana. How could you have done this? You've caused this tremendous financial loss. And the guy claims, well, I just forgot. Uben hamechaber sham eviraya lazeh mehagemara bebeitza. And so the son of the author of this Tshuva Sefer wants to bring a proof from the Gemara in Maseches Beitza. It talks about Gabe Suma Sheshachach Lasos Erev Tavshila. A blind man forgot 1 year to make an Erev Tavshilin before Yantif that would enable him to cook on Yantif for Shabbos. V'shana Rishona Ushniya Amar Lo Harav Tismoch Alai. Up, careful. Okay, all right. So Vishana Rishona Shniya Amrlo Harav Tismoch Alai. So the first and second year, the rabbi tells him, the rabbi of the community says, it's okay if you forgot to make the Erev Tavshilin. You can rely on me. You can rely on my Erev Tavshilin, even though it's Yantif already, we give you permission to cook. The second year, the same thing happened, and the rabbi said, it's okay, you can rely on me. Aval b'shana hashlishis amar lo posheya ata. But in the third year, the rabbi said, if you forgot a third time, then you're called a posheya, and you're not allowed to rely on the Rav. By the way, we paskin, we're even more machmir. If you forget one yantif, you can rely on the Rav's Erev Tavshilin. That's how we paskin. And that's why when I make an Erev Tavshilin, it's actually printed in the Siddur. I hereby making an Erev Tavshilin not only for myself, but also for all of the residents in the city. For some reason, the Art Scroll Siddur puts that in for that everyone says that. And that's not really, that was never the original institution. I don't know how that got into the Siddur. But it really is meant for the Rav to say, the Rav of the community. And so the third year, the rabbi said, you can't rely on my Erev Tavshilin anymore because you're negligent. We paskin that only once a year you can rely on the Rav's Erev Tavshilin. If you forget on Pesach, for example, then you can't rely on the Rav's Erev Tavshilin for Sukkot, or vice versa. Mashma da hashichacha shel hashnatayim harishonot lo nikreit pshia. Says it sounds like from there that the first two times the guy forgot is not negligence. So just forgetting something one time is not considered an act of negligence. Omnam b'sof devar of hela sheshichacha nikreis pshia al pi hagemara shekolo yadana pshiusa. However, he eventually rejects that and says that anytime, the Gemara says, anytime a person says, I don't know about information that we expect him to know, like is where did you leave that item that you were holding for safekeeping? So that's called pshia. Okay, next. Uveshut shvus Yaakov tama ech yechashev shichacha lepshia. Another tshuva sefer says, how could you say that forgetting something is negligence? Gemara omeres b'maseches Shabbos, shachach ikar Shabbos nechshav l'shogeg. That if a person forgets that it's Shabbos and he does a malacha, he's a shogeg. Shogeg means that he's not liable. It's not considered to be a malicious act of Shabbos violation. Umasha Hagemara Amar Gabi Pikodon Kolo Yadana Pshiusahu, and his argument is, what about the Gemara that says anytime a person says, I didn't know, or I don't know where I left it, I forgot where I left it, that's called Posheya. Ainu Mishum Sheyesh Hevdel Bein Pikdonot Lishar Devarim. He says that's because when someone is watching over a valuable that belongs to somebody else, there's a higher level of expectation. Because when it comes to an item that has been charged to me for safekeeping, my obligation is to do as follows: keep it with my valuables, and also to mark down in some kind of ledger or record book where I put it and what it is. Okay? The fact that I neglected to do so makes me a posheya. But in other cases of forgetfulness, that's not necessarily called negligence. It could be shogeg, it could be ones, but it's not the same level of negligence. Rashi the Beitza Shema Yivsha, and what Rashi says in Maseches Beitza, that a person may be negligent and not make an erev tavshilin, dahainu yishkach v'lo ye'arev, v'duber sham b'shichacha shal yedei atzlus davi pshia gemura. He says that's talking about a person who, because of his laziness, neglects to do an erev tavshilin. Aval sha'ar mekomos shel shichacha, avi bichlal helam davar shechayv shigigas chatas. But other places of forgetfulness, that's not called posheya. That's called shogeg. You're again here. I'm sort of unhappy with comparisons. We're comparing apples and oranges. We're combining laws of Isser Veheter with laws of Mamonis. When it comes to forgetting a certain halacha, that's one thing to call a person a shogeg. When it comes to my financial responsibilities, I remember, you're all old enough to remember when Steve Martin came out with comedy albums, okay? So I remember in the 80s, Steve Martin came out with maybe 70s, came out with a comedy album. I forget what it was called, something about small, I forget what it was called. But he said, if you ever get caught cheating on your taxes, just tell the IRS, I forgot. And that's a great excuse. Yeah. What's wrong with that? Just tell the IRS, I forgot. Yeah. And of course, the IRS will not accept that, or the CRA will not accept that as an excuse. Yeah. So, okay. So Asher al-Kain. So based on that, Kevin shezeh machloikes gedola beposkim im din shechacha kipshia o ones efshar lechayev oto al ma sheshachach es hamizvada. He says, based on that, Rav Sharaga concludes that you really can't categorically hold the guy liable for having forgotten the satchel that he was charged to take with him to Haifa, and he instead left it on the bus. The Yacholoimar Kimli kahaposkim sheshichacha kaones upat, because the guy could say, well, you know what, I forgot. And yes, it's true that there are times when we see in the halacha that shichacha is pshia, But on the other hand, there are instances where shechicha is not pshia. It depends on the circumstance. So, in other words, you could say that it's different when I hid something and I can't find it now versus when I took something with me and I forgot to take it off the bus. And I find this to be quite disturbing. Yeah, yeah, I find this to be somewhat disturbing. You're what? Oh, okay.
So now, and that's responsibility of security animal. Yeah. The other thing that's mentioned there is also if the animal's walking and it kicks a stone and it does some damage to the property,
Yeah,
you're only liable for repair the damage, nothing else.
right, right. So,
So I mean, I'm surprised that he didn't bring up these sorts of comments.
well, he's bringing up are cases of forgetting something. The issue of level of liability there's so many categories of levels of liability in other situations. His focus here is the claim of I forgot. Is that a credible claim or not? So Marvin, you do any homework on this yet? Yeah.
I couldn't find anything, but I'm disturbed with this last case too. I mean, where should the risk lie? It should be the guy who's taking it on the bus with him and he was entrusted with it and he forgot it. He's liable, you know.
Where's responsibility?
What?
On the bus with him,
You had just one job.
Yeah. What I did find in law of bailment is that you've got your general categories, right? Like Bill Shummer and all that, exact, the borrower, and the gratuitous daily for good consideration is the heart of the whole thing, same things. And you have the liability for negligence is basically, which is reasonable, a duty of care to act reasonably. That's that.
Right.
And the only way out is to show this guy on the bus to say, I acted reasonably, or there's some, in the contract, there's some exclusion clause, like, you know, a ticket case or something, you give the, you know, your parking lot or a dry cleaner or a repairer, is there some exclusion of liability saying we're not negligent, you know, for lost or stolen items or something like that? You can, by contract, limit your liability. But other than those two things, lack of negligence and, you know, limitation of liability.
I could certainly understand if I ask my friend, take this bag to Haifa, do you mind? He says, I don't mind, but I don't want to be held liable if anything happens on the way. Even if I forget. Okay, we'll have to hold it here for today. That's right. That's right. All right, we'll have to continue this. There's more to